and welcome to this week's episode of ECCB Connects. We all spend considerable time on the internet, and this exposes us to various cyber vulnerabilities, threats, and risks. I have with me Derrick Leonce, Systems Analyst in the Management Information Systems Department here at the ECCB, and he'll explain how you can protect yourself from cyber attacks. Derrick, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you for having me.
Derrick, we are now operating in a new environment which is controlled and driven by the internet. And with this, we have become exposed to various risks which threaten our privacy and security of information. This brings us to two important issues: cybersecurity and information security.
Absolutely. And I think they are important, significant, but it's important to note that there is a lot of convergence between cybersecurity and information security. In fact, they are often used interchangeably. Information security relates to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of assets, information technology assets. Cybersecurity, on the other hand, speaks more to the electronic domain and the same purposes of information security in terms of maintaining integrity, availability, and confidentiality, but focuses primarily on the electronic domain.
And when you say electronic domain, what do you mean by that?
I mean the what we call cyberspace. Cyberspace really relates to the interconnectedness of computers, and within that sphere of the virtual domain, so to speak.
With cybersecurity and information security, an individual or business can be exposed to threats, vulnerabilities, and risks. How do these differ?
Threats relate to events out there that may, if they were to manifest in your environment, would have some impact on your environment. Vulnerabilities are really internal, mostly to your environment. Actions, activities in your environment, behavior patterns that may be susceptible to threats. Risk, on the other hand, is about probability and impact. The probability that a threat will manifest in your environment to exploit a vulnerability in your environment.
And when you say environment, you're speaking about your online environment.
Your entire ecosystem, whether it's your online environment, your local environment, to mean your system at home, or it is your workplace environment. Basically, they are all intertwined to some extent.
Most transactions these days take place within some sort of online platform. We use ATMs, we have online banking, we do shopping online, we pay bills online. What type of these threats, vulnerabilities, and risks that you've mentioned, which ones an individual is most likely to encounter?
Obviously, the threats are out there. The threats remain out there. From the vulnerability perspective, it's about your internal environment. It's about you, how you are able to redress them. So whilst you will encounter a significant number of threats, I think the focus has to be on the vulnerabilities that you can most influence. Okay? Your ability to detect malicious emails that are targeting your environment, your ability to action them in a way that ensures your online profile, your ability to secure your endpoints that you use to access your online profile. Okay? These are the vulnerabilities that would most significantly affect your ability to address it.
Let's look now at some concrete examples of threats that an individual may encounter. I remember seeing a video some time ago about these scams hackers use when you go to your ATM machine. They have like false parts that can read your cards and so on.
There are a significant number of threats out there. I think from an individual perspective, the most prominent and the most common threat that you will face will be phishing. Phishing really is malicious email, social engineering type of attack where an attacker attempts to manipulate a user into actions. Definitely, I think it is important that users spend time trying to understand the attack methods, the ways attackers use emails to try to manipulate users. The way the users, on the other hand, need to be able to understand the techniques in terms of how to identify malicious emails, what actions to take, and so on.
So, for example, you see an email appear in your box from an institution that you conduct business with. For example, maybe your bank, asking you to take certain action, but it's false. It's not coming from your bank. So that's an example of phishing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But how would one know that this is not a genuine email?
There are a number of methods to identify an email, to make a determination that the email is likely genuine. First and foremost, email addresses are easily spoofed. Okay, so the email address on its own may not be reliable. But whenever you receive an email, you have to review the email and in its context. Okay, obviously email address is an instance. If the email address is your bank name and within parameters it has a domain that is not your bank's domain, that is an indicator that the email is false, that the email is fraudulent. If the email contains personally identifiable information, that is a red flag immediately. There is also concerns with regards to URL links in emails. If you receive an email, the email is requesting that you click a link, okay? There are tricks and tips that you can use. For instance, you can hover over an email, make a determination, it will pop up showing you what the actual URL is. Many phishers, what they do is they use URL shorteners. So you don't see the actual URL, but you see a shortened version of the URL. What you can do is grab the URL provided and use a URL shortening, a URL decoder, for instance, to determine that the URL is authentic. There are a number of ways that you can use to identify and determine that the email is probably authentic. I say probably authentic because in reality, phishers use significantly complex techniques that would deceive the average person.
But I guess one of the key things to look for is the type of information that's being requested, because I've always heard that, for example, a bank will never ask you for personal details
Absolutely.
about your account. So anytime you receive an email message like that, it should raise a red flag.
Absolutely, absolutely. Under no circumstances will your bank ask you to enter personal identifiable information within an email. No circumstances would a bank address you in a generic format. That is always a red flag. You receive an email and the salutation speaks to "Dear customer." That is always a red flag. If the bank is addressing you, the bank will address you most likely by your name. Also, the bank will not request that you provide them with information to authenticate you within an email. Absolutely. Many instances, you would have to verify the URLs as I pointed out. The bank would most likely not provide you with supply an attachment within an email.
You mentioned URL. How can an individual identify a URL that is genuine as opposed to one that is fraudulent?
Absolutely. A URL basically is a link to a website, the address to a website. Basically, there are two what we call protocols used for accessing sites. HTTP is the main protocol. There is the option of having it secure or unsecured. Accessing a site for transaction purposes that is unsecured is nearly certain to be a fraudulent site.
So that would be one without the S. That would be HTTP.
Absolutely.
Okay.
HTTP means the site is not secure. That means there is no protocol that encrypts data between your endpoint, that is your machine, your computer, and the site.
So no protection.
No protection. Essentially, everything that you transmit is in clear text. Okay. HTTPS means the site is secure. That is, TLS has been encrypted. Essentially, there is a logical tunnel between your computer and the site. So all your data that goes from your machine to the site is encrypted. And as I just mentioned, if it's a transaction site and it's HTTP, guaranteed to be malicious. Because every transaction site today will be secure.
So individuals need to look for that in the URL, HTTPS.
Absolutely. Key, easy way of identifying is look for the keypad. Look for the padlock on here, and definitely it would allow you view of a certificate if you are interested in going to details of it. But definitely, If it's not HTTPS, it is clear text.
You mentioned social engineering.
Social engineering is really hacking the human being. Phishing is just one form of social engineering. There are many other types of social engineering attacks. Phishing is really using, you would receive a phone call from somebody who's claiming to be from your bank, for instance, requesting information because they have deemed that there is unusual activity in your account. Okay, phishing is another example of social engineering. Social engineering has become so popular because of the fact that it is human interaction that is being manipulated here. And the focus really is on attempting to persuade users into acting in a way that is unusual to the normal pattern. There is also social engineering from SMS text messages, which is called smishing, so to speak. And that applies similar to phishing emails. Also, one type of social engineering that is, I believe, most dangerous is spear phishing. Unlike phishing, which is generic email sent out to, mass email sent out to a number of users, spear phishing really is a more complex form of phishing in that it is targeted. It usually occurs in the format of an actor would first recon you. Basically, they would first do online research on you, on the target, and use that information to increase the believability of the email. And that's the focus.
Because they would have done their research, so when they contact you, they're providing information about you so they seem authentic.
Precisely.
You mentioned the text messages. What should individuals look for in text messages that are fraudulent?
The obvious one would be the link. In many text messages, you will find a URL link prompting you to click a link to access a site. There is always, with text messages, the urgency of them to act on them immediately. And these are factors to consider. Obviously, as I mentioned, with URL links, many text messages, the URL is always shortened. It is useful that you grab the URL link and use a decoder, basically, online so as to expand to the valid link. And that is a method of you validating the URL, so to speak. Obviously, malicious actors use transposition and substitution a lot. And it is sometimes difficult to differentiate between a 0 and an O, for instance. And these are considerations that an individual must have and must look for.
Derrick, another area where individuals can be exposed to cyber attacks is the use of ATMs. What should an individual look for?
With ATMs, there are a number of skimming techniques that are being deployed today. Actors can implement keypads on ATMs, okay, basically to copy keyboard skimmers so as to copy pins and codes of ATM cards. It is imperative that users of ATMs review ATM so as to get a perspective on ensuring that, one, the ATM does not look as if it's been altered in any way. Obviously, the general safety recommendations around ATMs will apply in terms of times of use and so on. But it is essentially looking at the ATMs and ensuring that, one, the keypad seems to be in the order that it should be.
So you can actually touch it to be sure?
You can actually touch to be sure. Okay. In many instances, the skimmer would place a false stop on the ATM to copy the ATM.
And that's easily you can easily detect that?
It is not easily detectable, unfortunately. A good instance of it would pass the normal casual review. And obviously, it is ensuring that, one, the ATM cards fit in nicely. ATM machines are set up in such a way that the cards are tucked in. If your ATM card is difficult to be inserted, it's an indication that an issue exists. In instances where you think the ATM has been manipulated, recommendation is to report to the bank immediately.
And no bother to try to process that transaction.
Absolutely, absolutely. If there is any indication, any suspicion that there is a manipulation of the ATM, I would recommend that you report it to the bank and do not use the ATM.
So Derrick, the key word here is really for individuals to be vigilant.
Absolutely unaware. It's important that you remain aware of the threats that are out there and vigilant in the way that you act, the way that you react to them. I think it should be more proactive than reactive in terms of you understanding the threats out there and you working at ensuring that yourself and your environment is not predisposed to manipulation by these threats.
Derrick, this is a very interesting topic, but we're out of time. We'll pick up on this conversation next week. Thank you very much.
Certainly, thank you.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place, at your convenience, check us out on YouTube or Facebook at ECCB Connects.
We've come to the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Join us again next week when we'll continue our discussion on cyber attacks and cybersecurity. See you then.